You're listening to the Platform Launchers podcast. I'm John Stange, and it's great to have you with us this week because we're going to be talking about building and growing and monetizing your online platform. We're going to talk about how you could take your passion, turn it into a platform, and let that become a paycheck that helps you make ends meet. And I think that that's something that right now, if the news is correct, I'm hearing that that's something that's a concern on many of our minds. And this week, we're going to be talking about the fact that as many of us are building online platforms, we're looking at really building an online audience that we have the opportunity to serve with the content that we're creating. But for many people, that's a very mysterious thing. Many of us wonder, how on earth do you build an online audience? So we're going to talk about that. And I'm going to share 4 principles after I share a little bit of background and a very personal story of something that happened to me recently that reinforced these principles in my mind. But before we even get into that, before we dig into this idea of building an online audience, I have to highlight 2 of our members. 2 of the members in our members club have recently released books. And those of you that know me know that I'm a book nerd. I love reading books. I buy more books than I think I can ever possibly read, and I'm probably not the only one that does that. But I want to highlight a few of our members who have books that are either right about to come out or are already out. And the first one we're going to highlight is Roxanne. Roxanne, tell us your name and a little bit more about what you've got coming out.
Well, John, thank you so much. My name is Roxanne Boysick, and that's spelled Bocyck. And my new book is called Catherine's Dream, A Story of Spirit and Courage. And it's published through Morgan James Publishing. And it comes out a week from today.
I
And
love
I'm
it.
so excited. It's a story, it's a historical fiction novel based on a true story about my grandmother who came from Poland in 1921 under an
Whoa.
arranged marriage. Now, we had found out this family secret about her. Like, we always knew she came from Poland in the steerage of a ship and ended up in America, but we didn't know that she had been married before and that she ended up in a paper mill town where something happens to her that was all over the newspapers. And when I found out about this, I was like, oh, I've got to write this story. But the message of the story is, if you have a dream in your heart, despite the adversities that come your way, you can do it. So that's why I wrote this book, to encourage people to follow their dreams.
I love it. I love it. And you really piqued my interest with that. That sounds fantastic. And again, the title of the book?
It's called Catherine's Dream. And
Catherine's
it's
Dream.
available wherever you buy books, wherever people like to buy their books.
Excellent. All right, Catherine's Dream. So check that out. Be looking for it. It's coming your way really, really soon. Next week it'll be out. But if you're listening to this podcast, you might not be listening to it right when we're recording it, right? So it might already be out. Catherine's Dream. And
Thank you.
next in our members club here, we have Jody Skinner. And Jody, you've got a book that is perfectly timed for the Christmas season. Tell us about it.
I do, John. Thanks. It's a book that's called the L.M. Montgomery Christmas Collection. And I had no idea that Lucy Maud Montgomery not only wrote Anne of Green Gables, but she wrote over 500 short stories and had them published all through the US and Canada. And so this only has 8 or 9 of her stories, but it begins and has in the middle and the end has Anne of Green Gables kind of wrapping up the story. It's got a lot of her poems that she had a very troubled marriage as in her regular everyday life. But so I think for a lot of us, I think writing is an escape. And so I mean her poetry just reflecting on the Christmas season is so introspective, and she writes about what it was like to be Jesus's mother. And so we've got several of these poems and short stories, and we've collected artwork from the Smithsonian, from the Library of Congress, and a lot of other art museums. And so you've got this gorgeous full color artwork scattered throughout these poems. It's going to make a really nice gift.
I love it. And give us the title one more time.
The L.M. Montgomery Christmas Collection.
The L.M. Montgomery Christmas Collection. And where's the easiest place to buy it?
You can either buy it from Smidgen Press directly, and that's smidgenpress.com, or you can also buy it on Amazon and most major retailers.
I love it. Excellent. Well, thank you, Roxanne, and thank you, Jody, for both sharing your most recent projects. That's really exciting. We always love to give some space to promote these things here. And so if you're listening to the podcast right now, or if you are watching us on YouTube, be sure to check those books out. We're certain you're going to enjoy it. Now, getting back to our main topic, this idea of building an online audience. I want to tell you, for starters, a little story about a coaching experience that I had with somebody. Not long ago, I was coaching someone she's in the early stages of building her online platform, the early stages of developing that. And she's defined her niche. She has found multiple people to collaborate with. So that's certainly wonderful. She is gradually releasing her content, and it's high quality content. Some of the content she's been working on for quite a while. But her big question to me during our coaching call, was how will people discover the content I'm creating? How will people discover this? She's spent a lot of time on it, but she wanted to know, how are people even going to know this exists? How will they discover this? And again, that's one of the big questions that all of us who create online content wrestle with. I actually just asked our group here, they're live on the call here with me, and I asked our group before we started the podcast if this was one of the main things that they think about when developing their online platforms, and just about every hand went up. And then I asked a follow-up question: is this something that we tend to think is a bit mysterious? And again, just about every hand went up. For very obvious reasons, I think we'd all agree it's very hard to develop a successful online platform if we don't have an audience of people to share it with. But for many of us, we're content creators. We don't think of ourselves as marketers. And because we don't always think of ourselves as marketers, sometimes the audience, the online audience that we're trying to connect with, that seems a bit mysterious and maybe even a little bit difficult. And I think for some people, they just give up on it after a while because they don't understand how it works. So I want to end that mystery, and I want to do that in a couple ways. I'm going to give you 4 principles, all right? But before we can get to those principles, I want to give you some background on how I landed on those principles and how I've had the opportunity to test them in more than one instance or more than one circumstance. So what does it mean? Let's ask the question again. What does it mean to build, or what does it take to build an online audience? Is it even something that the average person can do, or is it something that you would think that maybe only people that are celebrities or superstars among us can do? That's something we all wrestle with, right? Well, I'm telling you, building an online audience is something you absolutely can do, but I'll also let you know that it can feel like a slow process when you first start doing it. So particularly in the early days of working on building an online audience, or getting your platform established, it could feel very slow. But many people who have succeeded at developing one, what they'll end up telling you is that eventually, after multiple seasons of faithful content creation, they noticed that they eventually hit a tipping point. And what ends up happening is, usually it goes like this. You just stay faithful to your task, you stay faithful to create your content, and then something you create lands, or something that you say in front of the right audience connects. And you may even be surprised at what it is. It may be something that to you just seemed obvious, but to other people, they think it's revolutionary. And you never get to discover that, though, if you quit too soon. And so when you're trying to build an online audience, the way that I'm really thinking about it and framing this for our purpose of our discussion here, the keys really involve showing up and adding value. So just frame it that way in your mind for starters here. We've got to show up and we've got to add value. And I'll say this, it's the same in every area of education. It's the same in every area of influence, whether we're talking about online or whether we're talking about things that are offline. And I have a very recent example, something that just happened in my life, where these principles were illustrated to me in a new way, and it just confirmed what I've been thinking and what I've been practicing all along. So you probably heard me say several months ago, if you're a regular listener to this podcast, or if you join our YouTube channel with some regularity, or if I just know you in my day-to-day life, you've probably heard me say that recently I started teaching classes at a local university. Now, I taught there from 2012 to 2018, so I've been there before, but I took a break from teaching there for a while because I was involved in several other activities and projects and all sorts of things. But After that several year break now, I decided to come back. But here's the thing, and this is kind of unfortunate, but it does make a lot of sense. When you take a break from a university, so I took essentially a 5-year break from teaching at the university, what ends up happening is you're quickly forgotten because there's always a high turnover of students. And there's even a decent turnover of faculty in an institution like that. The churn rate, the turnover rate is kind of high. So even though it doesn't feel like I've been gone all that long, to many people, I was brand new. I was an unknown professor teaching in a context that was familiar to me, but I wasn't familiar to the people I was teaching. And when students first signed up for one of the classes that I'm teaching this semester, I'm teaching several classes, but I teach a 3-hour class on Fridays, and that sounds like it would be dreadful, right? But when students first signed up for that 3-hour class on Fridays, they had no idea who was going to be teaching it. All they knew is that some faculty member, there was no name associated with it. Some faculty member was going to eventually teach it, but they wondered for months, who's going to be the professor? Who's going to teach this class? They basically signed up for it because it was a requirement, something that they needed, but they didn't sign up for it because of who was teaching or anything like that. And a few weeks before the semester began, I agreed to teach it, and people started wondering as they got the name of who their professor was going to be, they started wondering, who is this guy? Now, some of the students know my son. I have a son who presently attends the same university, and so some of those students knew him, and so they asked him, hey, is this your dad? Do I have your dad as my upcoming professor for this class? And he said, yes. And one of the students, can you imagine the audacity to ask my son this? But one of the students even asked him, hey, do you know if he's any good? So it's kind of funny that my son was in a spot where he had to answer that, but he said, yeah, I think you'll find him okay, but you be the judge. I think that's what he answered the guy. But when he told me that, he said, yeah, so-and-so wanted to know, is he any good? Like, what am I supposed to say? You're asking me about my dad, right? Well, the semester started with a little skepticism. I don't think it was just that one student that felt skeptical. I think a variety of them felt skeptical because they didn't know me from anybody. But each week, I show up and I teach that class 3 hours long every Friday morning, 8 a.m., 8 a.m. to 11 a.m. on Friday mornings. And I teach, and I show up, and I present the content to the best of my ability. And again, it's because it's a 3-hour class, I'm sensitive to the fact that it can easily become a snooze fest if I don't keep the pace moving. So what I try to do is be creative. I try to be interesting. I want to be engaging. So I ask a lot of questions and I call students out by name, but I also want to be helpful. And again, I'm trying to make the students know that I genuinely find interest in their success. I'm interested in seeing them succeed. And in the midst of all of that, I'm trying to communicate in such a way that demonstrates that. Well, over the semester, here's what I've been noticing. This is what's been happening. The students are participating at a very high level. We're most of the way through the semester right now as I record this, and they're participating at a very high level. There's even a bit of a culture that's developed in the class, which I'm really excited about. And I've noticed that almost all of the students are getting very good grades. They've been turning in assignments on time. They've been doing an excellent job in the work that they're doing. They're even giving me valuable feedback on which aspects of the course they're finding particularly helpful. I've even had, and this is something that blesses me, I'm one of those words of affirmation people. And so when people do this, it just kind of amazes me. But several of the students have actually gone out of their way to offer me personal encouragement related to the content of the course. And I think, wow, like that's above and beyond what I would have expected any of the students to do. But they've been offering me personal encouragement. And then they did this. This is where you're going to see a real tie-in to building an online audience. They've also told me that they're recommending the class to other students. And that became evident to me when registration for next semester began. And I'm teaching the same class Friday mornings from 8 to 11, 3 hours next semester, and the class filled up immediately. And not only did it fill up immediately, but they had to create a waiting list for additional students who were interested. And so I've been hearing about students that are frustrated that they're on this waiting list for the class. And I think that that's certainly interesting. And obviously, in the midst of all of this, since this was kind of a renewed experience for me, getting back in the classroom after several years of not teaching, obviously this has been very encouraging to me. But if you break down what happened here, you're going to see some principles that they're principles that are at play here that I think contributed to this outcome. And they're principles that'll also help us develop either an online or an offline audience. And there's 4 things that I want to point out to you because I'm certain that they will help you. And I think that these are universally true. And I'd be willing to argue my point should anyone choose to email me and want to argue about this, but I don't think we'll go in that direction. But here's point number 1. First of all, 4 reasons why I think this is happening. Number 1, I am genuinely interested in the subject matter that I'm teaching in that course. And that's being conveyed with the enthusiasm that I use as I teach it. So I have personal, genuine interest in what I'm teaching, and you can't fake the enthusiasm. The enthusiasm I'm showing, they know it's real because I'm genuinely interested in the course content. So that's number 1. Number 2 is this. I genuinely care about the success of those students. That's, again, something that cannot be faked. They know I mean it. I follow up with them. I want them to do well. I personally have taken the time to get to know their names. I know the names of every student in that class, and it's a large classroom. I know their names. It can't be faked that I am genuinely interested in their success. They see it. They experience it. They've communicated it as I've communicated it to them. All right, number 3, I show up every week highly prepared. I am not winging it. It's a 3-hour class and there's no fluff in it. I don't wing it. In fact, I actually typically arrive with more content than I can fit into that 3-hour time slot. And every week I think, boy, if I just had maybe 1 more hour, I'd be able to get through all of this. But obviously I got to be sensitive to the clock. All right. That's number 3. Here's number 4. The content that I'm teaching is valuable and has real world application. It's not just theoretical, it's practical and applicational. Now, if you've been listening to the Platform Launchers podcast or watching us on YouTube for any length of time, or if you've been reading our blog, you're probably not looking for tips on how to teach a 3-hour class on a Friday. I understand that. You're looking for ways to build an online platform that connects with the right audience, and then something that's going to help you earn an income that maybe will be able to replace your traditional sources of income. These are the type of things that we talk about here. And I can assure you with 100% sincerity that the way I've gradually built my online audience, it involves the same exact principles that I'm teaching in that class. And notice that what I'm saying there, none of it is gimmicky. All of it is about being faithful to something and genuinely interested in the success of other people. And what I'm doing in that class that has resulted in next semester filling up and a waiting list and people recommending it and things like that, it's the same exact approach to what I'm trying to deliver online. And it's what I would recommend that you notice and apply in your circumstance as well. So let me summarize it again. 4 things. Number 1, I'm enthusiastic about what I teach. Number 2, I care about other people's success. Number 3, I show up prepared. And number 4, the content that I'm teaching is practical, actionable, and valuable in the marketplace. So think about that in regard to your online platform and what you're trying to build and the mystery of building an online audience. Ask yourself these things as questions. Are you enthusiastic about what you teach? Could you teach it with enthusiasm, even without preparation, right? If someone just asked you to just speak about this, just right off the top of your head, could you do that? Secondly, do you care about the success of other people? Sometimes I see people try and develop things online, but I discover over time that they're mainly concerned with their own success and not the success of other people. And then they wonder why that doesn't connect with other people. Well, if you make your platform about you, it's not going to connect with other people. But if you make it about the people you're trying to serve and you care about their success, they will notice that, they will appreciate that, they will reward you. Third question, do you show up prepared? Meaning, every opportunity that you're given to show up, do you show up? And when you do show up, are you prepared? If you're going to be teaching something, have you put thought into it? Have you put time into it? Do you put effort into it? Fourth question, is the content you're teaching practical practical, actionable, and valuable in the marketplace? Is it something that people could latch onto and say, yeah, I can understand what I'm supposed to do with this? If that's the case, these are things that will contribute to your online audience growing. And I bring these up because most people do not think this is the way you build an online audience. Most people would not assume that these are the things that I would recommend. In fact, almost always when I talk to people about building an online audience, they go right to the idea of social media. And again, I think social media is great. I think social media is useful. It's just not what I've felt necessary to use to build my online audience. I did not build it with social media. I don't think it needs to be overly relied on. And in fact, sometimes I see people over rely on it to the point where they wonder why it's not working because, and I look at it and I think, well, do you have these other pieces in place? Or are you just trying to promote content about yourself on social media? And then you're wondering why people aren't connecting to it. But then I ask the question, well, is it even about other people or is it really just stuff about you, right? You don't have to sell your soul on social media to build an audience. You also, and it's unfortunate when I see some people do this. I've seen this more times than I want to count. But some people will actually go to extreme lengths of kind of making themselves look a bit silly and try and gain maybe even a form of unhealthy connection to somehow turn that into an audience. I think, yeah, you might develop an audience by making yourself look foolish or doing something kind of silly and ridiculous, but it might be an audience of people that are just tuning in because they feel bad for you. So that's not really a great way to build an audience. My thought on this is that you just need to keep showing up and adding value. And as you continue to do that, word of what you're doing will spread because one person that you've gone out of your way to help is very likely going to tell somebody else that you helped them, and word of mouth is going to spread. And if you keep showing up week after week with no loss of enthusiasm, you're eventually going to hit a momentum tipping point. It may not happen overnight, but it will happen eventually as you continue to help more and more people. So where should you show up? When I say show up, where should you be showing up? Well, my answer to that is wherever you get an open door. So show up on your own platform, show up as a guest on the platform of others. One of the fun things that we do here in our group, I see this from time to time. Sometimes when people have similar content, they will invite guests from our group to show up on their platform, and then they'll trade guesting spots and do things like that. Last week we had Kent Sanders on, and he shared and really blessed us with a lot of his knowledge. Well, multiple times he's had me as a guest on his platform, right? So show up as a guest on the platform of other like-minded people. Show up on your own platform. Show up on podcasts. Show up on YouTube. Show up on blogs. Even show up on social media. Take opportunities if you get to speak at conferences and you like speaking. Show up at conferences. Show up at webinars. Basically, show up wherever you get an open door that fits with what you like doing and how you like communicating. And if you keep showing up and if you keep adding value, just watch, because your audience is going to expand, your influence is going to expand. And if you're also trying to build a business that allows you to sustainably serve other people while feeding your household, you're going to find that those connections get made as well. So a few things to think about this week. I hope something I said here is useful and helpful if you're listening to the podcast or joining us on YouTube. In just a moment, I'm going to segue into a Q&A time that I have with our members club each week related to this content. But I want to let you know, if you're a regular listener to this podcast, and you want to join us for one of these live calls, there's a lot of value that gets shared and a lot of connections and relationships that get made, a lot of accountability and enthusiasm that gets shared with the group. And we want to invite you to take a free 2-week test drive. Just head over to platformlaunchers.com and join our membership community. We call it our members club. You could take a test drive of that for a couple weeks and see if you like it and you want to be part of what we're doing. You'll also get immediate access to the launch plan course that'll show you the basics of starting your online platform and building that, and all the important foundational steps that you want to have in place. Plus, you'll get immediate access to hundreds of hours of content in our online video library on all sorts of subjects, talking about all sorts of topics related to online platform development and business building. And we have lots of videos there with guest experts that we brought in to speak to our group. So you can check that all out at platformlaunchers.com. Take the 2-week test drive, and we would love to see you as part of our group. But that is it for this week. Thanks again for joining us. We look forward to catching up with you again right here very soon. But in the meantime, we hope you have a wonderful week, and we'll talk to you in one calendar week. Talk to you soon.